Okay, so I think we'll get started now that it's 5 past. So hello to everyone. Thank you for coming and welcome to our event, Navigating the United Nations Young Professionals Program. We are very excited to be hosting this in collaboration with our partner, OpenIGO, and to be welcoming two HR specialists who will offer us invaluable insight into what the YPP is, what the application process entails, and other tips. Before I present our guests, I also just wanted to say a few words on our partnership with OpenIGO. So as some of you might know from previous events, this is the first year that UNSOC has established any such partnership with an external organization. As part of the partnership, our members have access to a 15% discount on OpenIGO products using the code LSEMON15, which applies to ebooks and guides. We also are contributors to OpenIGO's online magazine, writing articles about careers in international organizations and international affairs. So I would highly recommend that you check out their website. I'll put that in the chat in just a second. And I also do recommend that you stay until the very end of the event, as we will be sharing the details on how to enter a raffle to win a free OpenIGO YPP guide. If you win, you will also have 30 days to ask any questions that you might have to OpenIGO about the content. So the next thing is our speakers. So first we have Michele, who is an experienced HR strategic advisor, talent profiler, and career coach. He has worked with the European Commission, various UN offices, and other international organizations. And second, we have Rebecca, who is also an HR professional, has 10 years of experience in private and international organizations, and she also was part of the Young Professionals program last year in New York. So that's it for me, and now I'll pass it on to Ingra, who is the COO of OpenIGO.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to have all of you joining us here today. And it's also a pleasure for OpenIGO to be a part of this. For those of you who don't know, we are a startup that was originally founded in Brazil. And then we've grown to be this extensive network of professionals that are looking to kickstart their career with intergovernmental organizations or those who are already part of these organizations. So we have many international civil servants working for us, as well as young professionals just like Rebecca. Michele is one of our coaches and Rebecca is a great friend of his. So I thank you once again, Rebecca, for joining us today and for being a part of this. Last year, I was here joined by another one of our coaches where we talked about opportunities within the UN system. So today will be slightly different since we're talking about a very prestigious recruitment initiative of the United Nations. At OpenIGO, we help these professionals that are interested in entering this world of intergovernmental organizations with many different preparation packages. We also we offer application review services, mock interview that are carried out as per the original model of the international organizations, as well as ebooks. So today at the end of the event, we'll be raffling an ebook. Well, you will have the opportunity to sign into a form to have the opportunity to win it, which is a comprehensive guide that will explain to you every and each stage of the United Nations Young Professional Program since the application stage until the interview one. I hope that today will be a fruitful moment for all of you and that you get a lot out of this. Thank you so much once again, Michele and Rebecca. It's with you guys.
Thank you, Ingra. Thank you, Fernanda. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon, all. We are all in different time zones, and actually I would like to give a special thank you to Rebecca because she's actually in Perth and Australia, and she's currently, if I'm not wrong, really early in the morning. So thank you, Becky, for joining. Before actually I share the presentation, I would like to give a little round. As we are some participants, I would like to basically test some features whilst I start sharing the presentation. So can you please use the reaction and see if you can raise your hand or a thumbs up to see if we are all connected and able to use the features. Please just go ahead. Okay, please, everyone else, start using the, all right.
Mine's not turning off.
Awesome. So can you guys see the presentation? I think so. All right. So my name is Michele, but before I go in, Becky, would you like to do some introductory remark as well, or shall I dive in?
Go ahead and I'll follow your lead.
Awesome. Okay, so we will dive in a little bit. First of all, before I start, I would like to thank the sponsors for this event, OpenIGO and LSE, United Nations Society, because without them, this event would not be possible. And of course, for your participation. So thank you once again to Ingra, to Fernanda for inviting us to that. And we hope to give insights. An introduction, it was remarked several times, it will be very insightful. So we hope to provide these insights, and that will be useful for your future career, for your future applications. So please get pen and paper, because we will do a couple of exercises together. And as I mentioned earlier, please try to test now before we actually start preparing, doing the presentation. We have 30 seconds. If you want to ask questions, please use the feature ask question. So we'll be reading them. I'm not really good at multitasking, so I will be probably stop for a second and reading. Okay, so it seems like we're all ready to go. Yes, I see your faces. That's beautiful. Please, if you can, share also your camera, because it would be nice to also see your face or your mask. And I actually hope all of you and your families and loved ones are very healthy, especially in these times. So I send you my big health energy to you all for a better time anyway. So, alrighty. So let's go forward. So my name is Michele, or Miki. I'm a member of the board of director of ICF International, Austrian chapter. I'm a career coach with OpenIGO. And as you see from the logos, I'm the founder of Nature Motivation, which is a startup trying to push people to work on their motivation and inner motivation to find a job and pursue their real life purpose. I worked with the European Commission, with the United Nations in different offices and agencies from DC, with the IEA, currently I'm also coaching with the United Nations System Staff College, UN Women, and UN OCHA. Besides my university's degrees, I'm also certified psychometric test user and occupational psychometric test user. So with this, basically, it helps to profile the talents, to understand psychometrics, an ability and a personality of individuals, for example, for executive searches or for instance, helping United Nations organization to hire the next directors and so on. So the word is to Becky now.
Okay, hi everybody. I've lost my Zoom screen for a second there, but in any case, as you can see on there, I'm an HR professional with over 10 years experience. My career started in Australia following my university studies, which are in HR and PR under communications degree. I moved to Vienna in 2011 and was fortunate enough to get a job at the International Atomic Energy Agency as a team assistant, working in the nuclear safety area on many missions and workshops, getting a lot of people to Vienna for a lot of these events and mobilizing them also around the world. And in my time there, I was fortunate enough to get back into my area of specialty, which is HR, as you see, and go on secondment to the UN as an HR partner. During my time there, I found out about the YPP program. And at the end of my secondment, I was able to sit the exam. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. But was able to sit the exam, and then I returned to my post at IAEA, and later on I've again been fortunate enough to join the UN. So my areas are benefits and entitlements, recruitment, and just general HR policy advisory. Back in Australia, I specialised in graduate recruitment, so I was doing a lot of university outreach and going to careers fairs, and also guiding the management of a international consultancy in recruiting and managing their engineers, environmental scientists, and architects. Another important point is while I was in Vienna, I also studied my master's degree in HR and managed to do that all the while working at IAEA. So a bit of a mix of work and professional experience there. So I look forward to some questions later, and also look forward to hosting this together with Miki. So back over to you.
Thank you, Becky. Actually, a side note, that's when we got to know each other, Becky and I, for you guys to know. Like we were colleagues first in the IEA, and then that's actually a real example of how it is working in international organizations. Getting to know each other, and then actually a beautiful friendship since then, actually. So time flies, actually.
I believe we met in 2012, actually, so it's been a little while.
yeah, exactly. Actually, it was a Fukushima nuclear accident time, so it was like, okay. So moving on, here is the few of the topics we'll touch on today. We will have Becky will guide us through an example of YPP timeline, and then we will share a few tips which we both believe, and I personally believe, that it's our, let's say, the cornerstone of for application writing and finding the job. As you can see here, I wrote finding the vacancy because you will see why the vacancy. And then we will go through understanding the job description, describing achievements and responsibilities. And we will have a little exercise, I call it coaching corner. Well, I will need you to actually use your microphone and speak, so get ready for that. And then we will have a little tips on creating a cover letter. We touch upon these topics because, out of experience, those are the most common questions that I receive into career fairs or these kind of webinars. And I hope that will be what you're expecting from this webinar. If not, please use the question and answer. I will try to answer the questions. Any questions so far before I jump in? Okay, all right. So, Becky.
Right. Just an important point there, which we missed, that is worth mentioning. We are representing ourselves, or I don't know if Miki, you want to expand on this. So we're here in our own personal capacity, Miki in representing his own company, and myself as an HR professional, separate from the organization which hires me. So in putting forward your questions, particularly from my perspective, there's certain ones which I may not be able to answer because anything that I give you insight to generally should be available in the public sphere rather than insightful information which I only have access to as a UN employee. So just to keep that in mind to avoid any conflicts of interest there, but I hope that regardless of this, I'll be able to inspire you or provide you with some worthwhile information. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Miki.
Yes, exactly. I totally support that. And also, what we're putting today here, we're sharing with you today here, is our personal views and what we've been through the last 10 years, including applying ourselves for jobs and attending interviews. So it's, let's say, our giving back to those who are interested to pursue similar steps that we did, and the do's and don'ts, basically, that we went through and we learned, and we want to share this with you. Becky.
Okay, so as I mentioned, in 2017, I was on secondment to the UN, and it was at this time that I was lucky enough to qualify to sit the YPP magnet exam. Although it's a YPP program and called Young Professionals, I was very lucky to scrape in before my 32nd year. And I was also very lucky that Australia was on the list at that time, which now it is not. So a lot of things had to line up in order for me to have that opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it. So just a brief overview. In December, I sat the exam. It was during March where I received an email confirming the exam result. It was in August 2018 that I was invited to participate in the competency-based interview. And in this interview, I was interviewed by a panel of four experts from Nairobi, Lebanon, and New York, which was very interesting, but a very difficult 2 hours, I have to admit. And a few months later, in October 2018, it was confirmed that I'd passed everything successfully and I would be added to the roster. So from November 2018, I was live on the roster. Only in the last couple of years, they've actually expanded the duration that people can remain on the roster. So at the moment, one can be on there for 3 years, I'm sorry. And it was throughout the course of 2019 that many P2 positions were posted on the UN website, and people on the roster were encouraged to update their PHP and apply to those vacancies in accordance with the job family they were hired under or rostered under. So me being under the magnet program, and basically to wait for interest from hiring managers. So after 1 year on the roster, I was lucky enough to be contacted in relation to 2 different positions in New York. And one of those was for Associate HR Officer in the Department for General Assembly and Conference Management. And after a successful talk with some of the hiring managers from that office, I was lucky enough to be selected. And 2 months later, I moved to New York. So since February 2020, I've been on the YPP program officially as Associate HR Officer. Not the most ideal of times to join and to move to New York 3 weeks before a lockdown. But nonetheless, I'm very grateful and yeah, very pleased to be with you guys here today to share that experience. So that's a bit about YPP, and I'll hand over back to Maki to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Becky. Actually, yesterday, you remember, Becky, when we were talking about this part, and actually, I would like to use this opportunity to ask a little bit around here, because, the YPP is actually the program of the secretariat. Now, we were talking yesterday with Becky, we were like, wait, but do you think people who know the difference between secretariat, offices, funds, agencies, is there anybody very courageous? Not, I'm kidding, just speak out, don't worry. The difference between secretariat and agencies, for instance. It's not an interrogation. I think it's really like interactive. If you don't talk, I'll pick and choose. Huh?
So just to reiterate Mickey's question, does anybody know the difference between the secretariat and the funds, agencies, programs of the UN system?
Raise your hand or just speak out.
Don't be shy.
Yeah. Or in 10 seconds, I'll mention a name. Dun, 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 dun. So. Okay.
I think everyone's Googling it just in case.
Yeah. Okay. So, you
somebody raised their hand.
Yes, please speak. Please speak.
Yeah,
Please use the microphone.
Yeah, the Secretariat carries on the day-to-day work of the UN, while the agencies are on specific, for example, projects like UNHCR and UNICEF and all that. So kind of like the civil service, the Secretariat is doing like the office work of the UN.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Jenny.
Hi, I don't really have any questions. So yeah,
okay.
But I'm happy to hear what other people think.
Okay. And wait, I cannot see the name of this person. This person did not put the name. So it's right above Ingra with a hoodie, with a blue hoodie. What's her name? I cannot see your name. Wait. All right. Chiara Fumagalli. Oh, okay. Chiara.
I think that the secretariat is in New York, and it's like as Mahin said, like the bureaucratic office, and nothing else actually. I cannot remember.
Don't worry, don't worry. Again, it's not an interrogation. Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Yanni, for also sharing your views. Becky, would you like to step in?
You go ahead. I'll chip in afterwards.
So actually, all answers were good answers. Of course, we don't expect you to know, and it's a very complex matter. Actually, there's so many of those that if you actually look at the chart, it's so huge that you will discover new things. I'll give you an example. For instance, UNDP, it is a program. So as you said, Chiara, the secretariat is in New York. Yes, but also the secretariat is elsewhere in the world. So the secretariat, it's, let's say, the art, if you will. And then there are different ramifications of the United Nations organizations. So each one of them has YPPs, let's say, JPOs, different programs for young professionals, and as well as different placements. So it's such a huge world that we actually recommend you to explore that, because there's not just the YPP. That's the bottom line. Becky?
Yeah, so the secretariat, especially the HR side of it, is responsible for a majority of the policies and processes which guide the work of the UN. We also, particularly my department, houses the General Assembly. So some of you may be familiar with the General Assembly meetings in September of every year, where all of the member states gather to agree on certain resolutions, which again guide the work of the UN. The Security Council is also a very important part of that as well. So a lot of the major decisions and processes are decided upon and implemented through the secretariat. And then a lot of the work funnels down to the individual funds, programs, agencies of the common system, where they'll specialize in particular areas involved in the mandate of the UN. So those organizations which are under the common system also have a common salary scale and a lot of the same conditions applicable, where it also helps then to move between the various organs, let's say. And then there's some outside of that which still have commonalities, but they'll have, for example, a different board, a different governing board. They will have a different program. Most importantly, they have different funding. Yeah. So for example, where Maki and I came from in the IAEA, their governing board determines how the funds will be spent, and also how they collect them. And in this regard, there's different agencies which have different funding programs, and then it trickles down to the type of employment they can offer as well. So you'll see some agencies are a bit richer and can offer more stability with their roles and longer term contracts, as well as let's say staff positions. And then there's a lot of the agencies and say missions and so forth, which can only offer like consultancies without the same benefits and entitlements that staff would have. So that's really important to look for when you are considering what sort of stability you're looking for, what sort of time frame, and Maki will go into that as well, when you're planning your career, what sort of time frames you're looking to work within, what you can afford as well. I mean, some people can simply not manage to have short-term contracts, for example. So you won't necessarily go looking for positions in an agency that can only offer those. So there's a lot of different things tied in with the type of agency or fund or program that you will consider applying for. But again, back to the Secretariat and the YPP, they're regular budget funded positions which offer a lot of stability. And in my example, or the case of someone like me on the YPP, after 2 years successful completion of work on a P2 position, you would then be offered a continuing appointment, which also offers a longer term prospects within the Secretariat. So Yeah, so I'm sure you might have a few questions stemming out of that, but I guess without further ado, we will carry on with the presentation.
Yes, so here is a few tips before we go a little into details of the applications. So throwing random application does not work. This is it's the number one tip, because out of experience, and also when I'm coaching people, sometimes most of the times some clients, they come and say, okay, I've been sending 100 applications this month, and let's see if something turns back. It doesn't work. It's actually sometimes, unfortunately, it's a waste of energy. So what we're going to talk today is how to tailor your application, and that's very, very important. So don't fish in a net with a net, but target the position for which you meet most of the requirements. With that, know your odds. Now, what I mean with know your odds, 80% of the candidates tend to apply to headquarters positions. Let's face the reality. Who does not want to work in New York or in Vienna or in Rome or in Geneva? And a few percentage, around 20%, apply to field positions. Now, if you know your odds, clearly, I think I would suggest try to apply to a field position first. That will increase your chances. And with that, make sure to have a short-term to a mid-term strategy, as Rebecca mentioned, 1 to 3 years. Besides, the programs consider that usually the recruitment process, an average, takes between 7 to 9 months. So whilst you're applying, you're preparing for application, and the process is finalized, it might take some months. So have a short-term strategy to a mid-term strategy. Don't throw a random application. Focus, target, and consider the numbers that I said above. Then my tip is the tip. Timing, information, and patience. So TIP stands for, indeed, the timing. Sometimes you might come across positions that you really feel you're the right candidate. Maybe you don't have enough experience, or so therefore you need time to get there. Information. I'm often asked, is it true that you need to know someone to get in a job? I cannot talk for everyone, but personally, I didn't know anyone when I worked in the UN. So, however, what helped was keeping myself updated, understanding what was happening, looking at the General Assembly budget committee, how much budget was allocated to certain funds. So understanding the macro areas that were moving. So kind of target my applications towards, I don't know, nuclear energy, for instance, which at the time was an important topic, or as migration was last year's. And be patient. Sometimes things will not move immediately as you expect. And Becky actually is, in my opinion, is one of exemplary person of that. Be patient, because if you actually follow this, I believe you will get there. It just takes time, as the right things, as the good things we used to say, isn't it? Try to also emphasize, when you look at positions and you're applying, what makes you stand out. What makes you uniquely you. Yesterday, Becky, we were talking about, for instance, volunteering. Some of you are, for instance, young professionals coming out of university, and the common question is like, hey, but I just finished university. How can I demonstrate the work experience? We all have something to demonstrate. If it's a team assignment at the university, or volunteering, or any activities that you did. Becky, would you like to say something on this?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the earlier tips, and I just want to reinforce that you should really do your research, know where you want to work, know why you want to work there. And as Maki mentioned, like this advice we're giving to you is not just for UN specific jobs, but is transferable across all sorts of applications. And I'm drawing on my days as a graduate recruiter for this professional services consultancy. And I remember calling people, following up on their applications. We used to get about 1,000 applications for each graduate intake. And I'd call them up to set up, to do a phone screen. And I would ask them, why do you want to work for, and the company was GHD, why do you want to work for GHD? And the answer I would get didn't fit what we were actually doing. Oh, because I really want to work in construction. Like, we're not a construction company, like, so be sure that you know about the place you're applying to. It's okay if you want to branch out into different areas, because let's say you're in HR like me, or finance or something, and you want to try out different fields, so you're not really set on which one you want to be stuck in, let's say, or to start in. But be aware, do your research, know what you want. I think often when we read through cover letters, you can tell when some people are really just blindly throwing out 100 applications without tailoring it. You can tell if they're desperate for just any job but haven't really put in the time to tailor it. So just think that somebody who's reading these applications reads through a lot of them. And as Maki said, you have to think about what it is that makes you stand out. Otherwise, they'll just be reading through it like as if you're a number, more or less. So have a good think about it. Maybe even ask people in your circles, or even if you have any lecturers, professors, that kind of thing that you've worked with, and ask them, like more experienced people, what do they think about their interactions with you that makes you stand out as well. So that's it from me on the tips.
Yeah, that's in the coaching world, we talk about public identity, like asking your peers or your closest friends what they admire you the most, what they admire the most about you. And that kind of gives an idea of course, we do have all the self-awareness. However, that gives you a little bit what others perceives of us. And that's a very good tip, actually. Thanks, Becky. I actually, what you said before about usually the first warm-up questions interviews is tell us about yourself and what would you like to work here. And it's true that when you did some research, it comes across that immediately. Another tip, I did not write it down, but I like to share with you is when I refer to patient, I also refer to accept failure, meaning learn from it. Because actually, I wouldn't be able to be here with you today sharing this tips if I would not have had this learnability from all the rejections I've got. So I've had a lot of rejections, many. And of course, it was hard, especially after putting so much effort in applying. But eventually, years later, I connected the dots and I was like, oh, that's what I've learned in that interview. And now I'm going to apply for the next one. So make sure that to internalize that, because sometimes there were moments of discomfort, for instance, where you lose a little bit of the energy and pursue it, because it's gonna get there. So now moving on, finding the vacancy. When I refer to the vacancy, keep in mind is what really is by looking at, for instance, at the main tasks of the department, of the unit that you're applying for. Later, I will show you a YPP example. Search what are the tasks of that unit that you eventually will work in, to understand if that's really what would you like to work on. Is this area of work for you? Do you actually have the relevant skills and experience to work in there? Would you love the positions, the tasks, and if you match the minimum requirements? So those are some questions that I suggest you to ask yourself when you're looking for a vacancy, as including your YPP, because of course the prestige of working in UN is appealing. But then once you got a job, you need to perform. And sometimes it happens that we do a job and we land a job and we had a lot of expectations and ideals, and then we're actually doing, oh, but that's not really what I expected. So by asking these questions to yourself when you're looking at a YPP, for example, you might skim through positions that actually are not related mostly to you, but others more likely are what you're supposed to do. Becky?
I think we'll go into more detail as we go on, but I would like to touch on more of the minimum requirements and sort of how jobs in international organizations differ from private industry. So I think we'll continue, and I'll add a bit as we go on.
Okay. Yeah, here, for example, we have as a picture. I took a picture of one of the last YPP exam position, 2020. The job family is management administration, which is magnet, what actually Becky mentioned before. It is the position is called associate administrative officer in the Department of Operational Support. Now, some people sometimes skip this part, and I think this is already the most important part. When I asked before, do your research, here you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, we know where it is the position in the Department of Operational Support. What I suggest in this case is do your research. Look what they do, the Department of Operational Support, what they do, what are the most important tasks, and that will help you not only to know what you're doing, but also to become aware of the keywords that are very important, for instance, in designing an application. Becky, would you like to say something here or?
Nope, continue.
Here is the so-called competences. Now, I would like to have some hands raising here. Do you know the competences? Are you familiar with this, the UN competences? Also, Fernanda Ingra can raise hands, huh? So let's see. I'm a bit slow with these Zoom meetings, but
Miki, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Are you familiar with the UN competences? So in the screen here, you will see the word competencies.
And what we use them for.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll raise my hand then.
Yes.
So I think that some organizations, some international organizations such as the United Nations and the World Bank, they are essentially value-driven organizations. So that says a lot about the organizational culture. So competencies are the soft skills that recruiters usually look for in candidates. And these organizations, as not as a whole, but the majority of them are adopting a competency-based selection process, which means that you as a professional, if you were able to display these competencies once in the past, you will most likely to display them again in the future. So I think that's why having the competencies on the job opening and also paying attention to this specific part is very important. So you can display these competencies through your storytelling in your application documents and also during the interview.
Impressive. Yes.
Very good.
Very good. Very good. Yes, actually, and I will pass the ball to Becky, to you, Becky, in a second. Indeed, competences are, first of all, they change their competency framework every, let's say, this is what we see here in the YPP is the competencies of the secretariat. But if you look, for instance, at UNDP, UNDP has a slight different competency framework. If you look at WFP, they have a totally different competency framework. If you look at UNICEF as well. So when you actually apply, especially for a YPP, you need to be familiar with that. What are the definitions and the level of proficiency needed? Becky, yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, it does become more important when you do get to the interview stage, because the interviews will be based on these competencies, and it will be up to the applicant to show how, or to provide positive indicators of how they have shown competency in this area in the past. And as Ingra said, experience in the past of demonstrating a particular competency should be a determinant of success in that area in the future. So she was quite right in that area. So and this applies again in the private sector as well. I mean, different values, different competencies elsewhere. The difference with UN and international organizations is that we show the competencies required. So you already get a bit of an insight into what the CBI competency-based interview will be based on and what they'll be looking at. And sometimes you don't get that advantage with other openings. So definitely don't discard that as an important indicator of what part of the selection process might entail.
Yeah, totally. And actually, one of my coaching approaches is that I actually work with clients, start preparing the interview to finalize the application process, the drafting of application. Why? Because, for instance, one of the questions that you might be asked in an interview here, it will be surely one of this for sure. One of the question will be on these competencies. And it would sound like, for instance, can you please tell us about a time when you had to demonstrate your planning and organizing skills? More or less, the question would sound like this. Now, if you expect a certain question like this, and you actually already emphasize this in your cover letter, in your CV, you ease the way for the reader, for the recruiter, which is going to read your CV. So it's like making your application easy to read for those who are pre-select, shortlisting for interview. A little side note, I'm sure some of you know that sometimes instead of now it's called solo interview. So basically pre-recorded interviews, which take place before the actual live interview. The difference between a recorded interview and a live interview is that the live interview, they ask you questions based on the past. So a predictor of what you did in the past most likely will happen again in the future. So can you please tell us about a time what you did in the past? In the solo, in the pre-recorded interview, most likely the questions will be about anticipating your ability, so the future. So you're given a situation, what will you do in that situation? That is a side note which is important, I believe, to make if ever you'll be invited for an interview or for a recorded interview. Becky, would you like to add or move on? Okay. So any questions, actually, audience, take the opportunity to ask questions.
I know we have some in Slido, but those ones we can answer at the end because there's none particular to the job description at the moment.
Perfect. So I'll move forward. Again, here the picture is wrong. It's my mistake. Basically, competencies are a set of skills and knowledge. So besides the competencies, we also have education, experience, and languages. Here, those are the minimum requirements for the YPP. A first level university degree, which is a bachelor's degree or equivalent of at least 3 years in these areas. This is a minimum requirement. Work experience and languages, there's no work experience here required for the YPP. However, above 60 candidates from the same country, some experiences may be taken into consideration. Languages, fluency in one of the working languages of the UN, which is English or French of the secretariat, is required, and knowledge of other is desirable. So here again, it's very important to make a difference between what is required and what is desirable. So when you look at the application, when you look at the YPP, for instance, job vacancy, ask yourself, what is required? Do I have them? And what is desirable? What is desirable is, let's say, the added value of your application, okay? Becky?
I'll just add to that. Requirements are eliminatory. That means if you do not meet a requirement, you will not make it through the first stage because you will not be considered eligible. So this is really important when you're spending a lot of time on applications to note that when there's a requirement and you don't meet that and you can't prove that you meet that later on, don't apply for it. So work experience, not required, fine. Relevant work experience, so that's okay because it's YPP, as we know. When we look at languages, okay, can you prove fluency in English or French? Big one, really big one. And you can't fake that. It'll come out, especially in the exam as well, even so the exam is held in multiple languages. And knowledge of other is desirable. If you put down another language, particularly one of the official languages, you might be asked to prove it at some stage later. So definitely don't lie about it. It might not be a condition of your job, but still anything you're putting in a PHP, you're then signing off at the end of that to say that you are not falsifying any information. So please do keep in mind our values or any company values, but especially the ones of the organization you're applying for, and apply with integrity and make sure that whatever you're putting down is truthful. And it's something that I wanted to, that I mentioned I would touch on now while we're talking about this. Private industry is different because they often say, and I'm not being sexist here, but they often say men will apply for jobs where they can maybe meet 20% of the requirements, and women are less confident and they'll wait till they can meet 90% of the requirements. It's not the case in international organizations. Pay attention to requirements, pay attention to desirables. If you think you do meet a desirable, do put it down. But requirements are a strong one. So I can't enforce that enough.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. That's very important indeed. Here I have a picture which kind of summarizes what we're trying to say, what I'm trying to say. So here at the bottom of imagine this is a pyramid. Here at the bottom of the pyramid, there's minimum requirements. That's all the candidates that meet the minimum requirements. In the middle is those who are meeting the minimum requirements and also have met some of the desirable. And sometimes, most of the time, only few get selected. So here I kind of make a little representation to show at the bottom there's education, experience, languages. In the middle, there's this competencies and expertise, what makes you, you. And at the top of pyramid, there is responsibilities and tasks. So are you able to perform that task or show your potential when you drafting your application? So you meet the minimum requirements, you're competent in this area, and you don't have enough experience, but demonstrate your potential into performing these tasks. This is the tailoring, which is very important. And or if you have some transferable skills, as I said at the beginning of the presentation. So you did a research assignment at university. This is a teamwork. Now, one of the core competencies is teamwork in a multicultural environment. You can demonstrate this desirable skill as a transferable skill. I did work in the university, working in a team, in a multicultural team. So that is easy to come across, if it makes sense. Becky?
Yes. So just to add to that, your transferable skills can come from a variety of previous experiences. So putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's been studying right through to the end of a bachelor or master's and actually hasn't had a job on the side or done any professional work placement, think about other things you've been involved in, team sports, maybe even a casual job, volunteering at the university, doing orientation, things like this, projects or excuse me, research assignments Maki mentioned. Definitely don't be caught up on the fact that you haven't had that much experience, because you probably would be able to draw from other experiences that are not particularly related to the type of job fields you're applying for, because especially for such positions where they don't ask for prior work experience, the hiring manager just wants to see and to know, to be able to tell that you're employable, you're dependable, a good team player, and a variety of other things like that you show initiative and just basic skills and competencies that anyone should have to be to have potential in the role that they're hired for.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking, Becky, now probably would be nice to share my personal experience when I applied in the beginning. I studied, I'm specialized in criminology. That's why I do profiling now, but talent profiling. So when I applied for positions, at the beginning, I did not put this into as a transferable skills. But then whilst I was doing the job, for instance, the project management in the IEA, I realized that my background in criminology helped me a lot to collect evidence for project management and project implementation. And that's when I got invited to interviews. I made this clear that that's one of the transferable skills I have. I am a criminologist, and this knowledge helps me to gather information for project implementation. And the hiring manager at the time, I remember clear, was like, actually, I selected you for that reason, because you brought in an innovative approach to something that was really needed. So think outside of the box. What is the unique skill, the unique perspective that you can bring and makes you, you? I'll move forward into the, what this is, again, another extract from the YPP magnet from last year. As you can see, I highlighted some verbs. We call it the action verbs. I mean, they're called in English action verbs because they foresee an action. Assist, provide, formulate, carry out. Those are very important keywords, action verbs that you need to make sure are in your application when you're drafting it and when you're applying. Any questions on this, or Becky, would you like to add?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. Here I would like to add, as also referring to what we said before, be genuine. Don't try and think of random things to fill in your CV. Think of times during your studies, a work experience where you might have carried out the same action in that particular field. So use the action verbs and relate to your past, how you demonstrate the competences they're looking for into that task. Now, we will have a little coaching corner, and that's where I will need you to use your microphone and to speak. Okay, so don't be shy. There's no right and wrong. We're learning here. We're sharing how we can best place ourselves in application. So we will do a little exercise. These are the questions. I will show you later the table. So what are the responsibilities that are involved in the position? Please take a piece of a pen and a piece of paper and a pen. What are the responsibilities? What, as an interviewer or manager, would you like to see an ideal applicant? Don't think how you fit the position. Just think about what would you like to see in the ideal applicant? And then what further expectations the managers might have beyond the stated requirements. Might sound abstract to you, and I will show you now what I mean by these questions. So this is a step one of an exercise. So this is the task and responsibility of the vacancy, the YPP that I showed you before. So this is, let's say, this is one task. So we put it here in the first column. What are the tasks involved in this position? Now, the question for you is, what do I want to see as an interviewer or manager in an ideal applicant in relation to this task? Please use your microphone. Eileen?
Hello.
Sorry.
Hello?
No. Yes, please.
Hi, Corinne. I think that an interviewer would want to see the skill of sort of having self-development, where, you know, in human resources, you have to keep on top of what's going on in the corporate world and have that sort of awareness of a bit like, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Commercial awareness almost, but for human resources. So like when you take on like the ability to research outside the role and bring that in.
Okay, so if you were to say to write here, what would you write? I couldn't hear the last words, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'd want to see an interviewee demonstrate self-development.
Okay. All righty, perfect. What else?
I think you said something about an ability to think outside of the box or see outside of the box, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Presentation skills.
Okay.
We also have a couple of people who have raised their hands. Yeah.
Mala?
Thank you, Corinne.
Yes, thank you.
I think you would also want to see someone who has organizational skills and can manage a workload, and also interpersonal skills to be able to manage staff, because if you're going to be working with people, I think that's also important.
Thank you. Who else?
I think he would want to know that the applicant can manage independently and with limited supervision.
Yes, there's one more person.
Yeah. I think I would hire such a person who has like a holistic mindset and can kind of like see things from a broad perspective. And also, I think two more things that are really important. One is time management, and the other one is adaptability to changing circumstances.
Sorry, Mickey, just to go back to the holistic.
Thanks.
What was meant? Yep.
No.
I see. Hoisting. That was a nice spell check. Got it.
So thank you for all your answers. Indeed, we have self-development, a person that is a self-developed, think outside the box, presentation skills, organizational skills. They're very, really good answers. Interpersonal skills, work independently, holistic mindset, big picture, time management, adaptability. Now, actually, I'm doing with you now this. For instance, what I would like to see as a hiring manager is exactly what you said. And assist, for instance, the first task here says assist in development of strategies. Experience in developing strategies. That would be, for me, the first thing probably I would look into the CV or into the candidates. Someone with that, which has experience. But of course, this is depending on the level. Now, if we look at the YPP, probably someone with this mindset. Becky, you as a hiring manager, what would you like to see?
Yeah, again, if we're tailoring it to someone that we don't expect to have that experience, we might then look at what is beyond kind of stated requirements. So yeah, you're right, strategy development, or so policy formulation. I mean, we might look for somebody, we might look at whether somebody's been involved in certain projects throughout their studies, for example, or their work placement. I'm speaking from myself, position of a hiring manager, not my job in the UN. I should make that clear.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, also, what I think is a really big one that was mentioned by our last volunteer, or second last, was actually the interpersonal skills. So that is probably the biggest one for HR positions. How well can you work with people? How well can you get along with them? Especially in HR positions, we are like the dumping ground for people's problems. and you know, you have to have a thick skin for dealing with that, and still being firm, but yeah, being firm and diplomatic where necessary, but still dealing with people with a smile on your face, and sometimes that's really difficult. So how would that come across in an application when we're just talking about like a PHP? We might then look at what some of your experiences have been throughout your studies if you don't have work experience, for example.
Indeed. And actually, I just checked the time. We're a little bit running out of time, so we'll rush up. I'll rush up a little bit here. So here, the last column, as you see here, what further expectation the managers might have beyond the stated requirement. Now, for instance, in this column, think even more, what is beyond, what's not written in the vacancy notice that you think the hiring manager would like to see. This is very important, this exercise, because you put yourself into the shoe of your future boss, basically. So interpersonal skills, what Becky said, yes, for instance, I want to see a person which has interpersonal skills, is able to cope with difficult people, for instance. So as a hiring manager, beyond the stated requirement, I want to see someone that probably has experience in that, or emphasizes this interpersonality skills. I'll move forward. Yes.
Just to add to that,
please.
Sorry, just to add to that quickly of beyond stated requirements, maybe if you've coached a team or led a team, been a captain of a team, led any sort of group activity. That might be some way that you can show your ability to work with people, coordinate people, bring them together, that kind of thing. So try and think outside of the box. Don't get too caught up on the fact that maybe you don't have a lot of work experience. As Mickey mentioned before, don't go fill your PHP or your CV with crap.
Yeah.
It has to be relevant. It has to be like specific. So make it count. Even if you don't have a lot to put there, make it count.
Yeah. And the second step of this exercise is indeed that. Ask yourself, the questions are, what tasks are basically the same to what you did before? So what required tasks you did already, or could you do, and how you compare with them? So the transferable skills, tailor your application, and once again, be realistic and truthful. This is very, very important, because when we're reading the applications, it's very easy. I mean, when I write applications, it was very immediate to spot some incoherences, some discrepancies, and that is, it disqualifies you immediately. Once again, use action verbs. So implemented, carried out, highlight your impact, and quantify. You need them. It's very nice to read. It's very easy to write. I implemented a huge project in university. Okay, but give a magnitude, give an impact, quantify what you did, what you did, how, and for whom. Here I give an example. So of the table I did before, there's an additional column, which I call it step 2. So you compare your current task, your previous tasks that you did at university or work, with the previous ones that are identified into the vacancy, job vacancy. Here, I wrote myself yesterday, designed one HR strategy and assisted the head of HR in implementing within 6 months new recruitment rules, probation policies, and performance management rules. Here, as you can see, I used action verbs. Then I continue by saying this work resulted in greater efficiency, consistency for HR planning, and reduction in lead time for recruitment. So I'm giving what the action verbs, exactly what I did, the timeline for whom, so the head of HR, and the what, and what was the impact. So try to think, look back, and what did you do that can relate to the vacancy? So that's tailoring. Becky, would you like to say something on that? The microphone.
Sorry, because some people might not have had the prior work experience, they may look at group assignments at university. How did you lead the group assignment? We all know when you do group assignments, one person is leading, the others are sitting back. So was there a time that maybe you've led the assignment and you've resulted, the whole group has resulted in a good outcome because of something you've done? Are you the one who divided the work? Are you the one that looked at what people's strengths are and sort of guided people towards fulfilling a particular role, something like that? But again, as Mickey said, try and use these action words to show what has been done, and then try to summarize with some resulting outcome. You don't need a half a page on it, short and to the point.
Yeah, what I always say here in this case, if it is difficult for you to quantify, because some projects, some activities cannot be quantifiable, find ways to demonstrate your impact. These exercises and all what I said so far, sometimes that's the work I do, and what OpenIGO does together with me is helping the candidates become aware of certain things that are not aware yet, to put in the vacancy in an application or preparing for interview. So if you're not aware, that's when it's about time probably to work with a coach, and that's more or less the exercise that we can do together. Now, some tips on creating a cover letter, just some bits and pieces here, and a very simple way. Imagine the cover letter to be divided in 3 parts. I'm sure all of you did this in university. So an introduction, a main argument, a main body, and a closing. Now, in introduction, why do you think you're the fit for the position, and how can you make an impact? Why you can make an impact? In the main body, show evidence of the achievements. Don't repeat your CV, and Becky will tell you more on this. And at the end, reiterate your potential value. So let me add a little bit. Do not regurgitate your CV.
Exactly. So consider, the best piece of advice I was given is that you should consider your cover letter as kind of like a movie trailer or a preview, where you want to put the highlights of your experience in there to gain attention from the hiring manager. So pick out the parts of your experience that are going to make you stand out. What is that's going to make you different? What is it about the job or the department or the organization that has really got your attention, has really inspired you to apply for that position? Some examples of your experience, again, if you don't have a lot of work experience, might be your involvement in a student body, if you're a speaker, if you did orientation, you're a coach, if you've lived abroad and you would like a career where you would be based in different duty stations or on different missions. Do you have a global mindset? And try to tie in your motivations with that position or the mandate of that organization. Again, don't be disingenuous by putting some out there statement in there. Be genuine with what you're saying. I often said, like an example for myself is, I'm Australian. I have a European background. My parents are European. I always wanted to live in Europe. So I was inspired to apply for jobs in Europe to broaden my working experience and my experience in different cultures or the culture of my my background or something. And I mean, I didn't write half a page on that, but sometimes I also dropped a line in there as to why it would suit me to work in a duty station like Vienna or something like that. As just an example, not that you have to follow that, but the main point is really like something a little, something that makes you a bit unique. But again, back to your experience and your suitability for the position is really the main thing. And that's where your argument comes into it, that middle part of this little diagram that Mickey's given you as well.
Yes. And here a little bit more on that. Of course, avoid slang and informal language. I'm just putting this here because sometimes, sometimes it happens that we want to be friendly, and we tend to be a bit more, let's say, use some sort of informal language. So be professional. Use complete sentences with appropriate grammar and spelling, because actually, unfortunately, I would say in my own experience, I've seen cover letters which in a second we can spot grammar misspelling, and it's quite, I don't know, not as a professional, but as a personal point of view, I do spend time when I'm applying. So when I look an application that I have to look at, I expect the person to at least spend some time in reviewing the basics, which are the grammar and the spelling. So this is very common. So do the work and follow the instructions regarding the cover letter and job application. For instance, the UN wants you to use the PHF or P11. UNDP has another format. So different organizations have their format. So follow the instructions, because sometimes, as simple as that, even if the application is perfect and you're not following the instructions, you disregard it, and that's a pity. Becky?
Yeah, just on that, usually 1 page maximum for a cover letter is the guide. Don't just fill the page for the sake of it. Add in there only what is relevant, even if it is only to half a page. Ensure correct formatting and spacing. Again, just feel free to reference a particular part of your experience that shows relevance to the job you're applying for. So again, try and make an impact, but in brief, and not by recounting every part of your experience or anything just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And another point, just another point.
Oh, please.
When you've got a hiring manager that is looking at hundreds of applications, rather than looking for applicants to screen in, they're looking for reasons to screen people out, if I'm honest. as a graduate recruiter in the private sector, as I mentioned, we used to get like 1,000 applications, and you know, it's very daunting for anyone. Obviously, you screen people out according to their meeting minimum requirements, eligibility, that kind of thing. So if you meet minimum requirements, you will not be screened out in the first stage, but then we're looking for extra things. And if I'm seeing a cover letter full of mistakes, or if I saw at that time, most of the time these people wouldn't get through. So maybe take the time to ask even a friend, or engage some professional services if you have the resources available to do that. I think your university also has services for that too. I know OpenIGO offers those services as well. So yeah, definitely try and make sure that you're putting forward a quality cover letter. Most of all, don't forget to use spell check on Word. It's pretty simple.
I mean, actually, these things can happen, especially if you do rush work. So that's why I said before about this kind of midterm strategy. It helps you to kind of plan out, like at least in a year time, 1 to 3 years. It's a good midterm strategy to kind of plan the application process. It's not going to visualize immediately, appear immediately the position that you wish to apply. If you do rush into an application, the likelihood of doing some minor mistakes, it's there. So take your time. So what did we learn today? Hopefully we shared something with you that you could use, and therefore you learned a few tips, as we said at the very beginning, how to find the vacancy. So do your research and search, understanding the job description. So remember the competencies, the tasks, how they tailor to your current tasks or previous experiences, how to describe your achievements and responsibilities by using the action verbs, and the coaching corner. Do you remember the table? So tailor what you did. And now the tips on creating a cover letter. Thank you for listening. That's me when I was a little kid. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, if not, please stay in touch. Here's my references on LinkedIn, on Instagram, but also I'm sure OpenIGO will share more of them, the references. So please stay in touch regardless of everything, because it's good to be in touch. We are all here, community, and it's very important to stay in touch and help each other. So any questions?
Yes.
Actually,
sorry, Rebecca.
Sorry, Fernanda. I think we were going to refer to the same thing, and that was the questions on Slido.
Yes, that's it. So we have a couple of questions, and there's a couple that are quite specific. So I remember you mentioned at the beginning that you kind of just made a cut before turning 32. So somebody was asking if there's a particular age that you have to take the exam, or at what age are you just not eligible for the YPP?
Exactly. So one thing I will make reference to, and I'm not sure if it was reinforced enough, but OpenIGO has a very comprehensive guide to the YPP process, which is definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. But that's in addition to what is already on the UN website. But to answer your question, yes, 32 is the cutoff, and you have to sit that exam before you turn 32. So in reality, I got placed when I was 34, but I sat the exam 2 months before my 32nd birthday, which made me eligible. So I was very lucky there.
All right, great. So we have another question. So you guys mentioned PHP a couple of times throughout, but some are just wondering what exactly it means.
So this is the acronym for Personal History Profile. Mickey also said PHF, that's Personal History Form. So we have a different name for it throughout different organizations or different parts of the common system. And basically, despite you having a CV, you're often asked to input your career history, your work experience, your education, all of those elements into an online form. And often it can be saved and downloaded as a PHP or PHF. So that's what we're referring to there. Mickey also mentioned the P11 as well. So don't worry too much about the acronyms, but the most important thing is that for a lot of these positions and also private sector, you have to copy and paste a lot of the information into an online form. And these are the same.
All right, great. We also have a question that came up at the beginning. So I remember, Michaela, I think you mentioned that it was like 80% of positions are based in headquarters, 20% are in the field. So somebody was asking if field positions tend to have a lower salary, or are they perhaps less secure?
I'll answer that, Becky. So this is the 80-20 was, it's my, let's say, simplifying way of summarizing things, meaning with the people I worked with and also the things I've seen, of course, the vast majority tends to apply to positions in headquarters, meaning Vienna, New York, nice locations. And around 20% applied to field positions. Field position can be Nairobi as well, which is a wonderful duty station, but also field position means non-family duty stations. So when the hazards are higher than in other locations, for instance, Rome, it's a lower hazard than in for instance, Kabul, for instance. So this is to explain the 80-20. And I add another thing. There are also people already working for the UN that, of course, have been working in the field and they want to then spend some years in a nicer location. So these odds that I told you, if you apply to headquarters, don't forget that you're competing also with those already working in UN that want to return to nice location. Of course, I'm now talking not about YPPs, so I'm talking about P2s and above. Mm-hmm. Now, to answer the question that I was asked, it's not that the positions in the field are not secure. You need to make a difference distinction between fixed-term positions, temporary assignments, consultancies, and the different contractual modalities. That fixed-term appointments are, I would say, the most stable. The YPP, for instance, is probably one of the most stable contracts. So, but as a coach, I will ask the person, what do you define stability? That really depends on you. The usual length of a contract for UN is a year, and then it gets renewed every year. That's an average. So in the field, it's not that you lose stability. Actually, in my opinion, as a young professional, I highly recommend to apply for positions in the field because you get hands-on experience. You much more competitive in the long term if you just work in headquarters. And yeah.
All right, wonderful. Oh, sorry.
Sorry to add to that quickly. So one thing that the UN and Common System is very good at is transparency with their salaries, their benefits, their entitlements. So you need to be aware of the category that you're applying for a position in. We're looking at, for the purposes of this session, we're looking at positions where you need a university or tertiary qualification to apply for. So we're looking at professional positions, which, I mean, you can also apply for the other categories, but these are the most relevant, as well as consultancies. And those, how do I put it, separate to that, quite often on vacancy notices, you'll also see what the funding type for the position is. So they might say, this is for a project of X amount of time. These positions are limited to this time period. YPP, 2-year fixed term, upon successful completion, continuing appointment. So it's often stated in the vacancy notice, anything up to 364 days is a temporary appointment. So, I mean, it's not to say that it's unstable, but you're aware of the fact that your appointment will only be up to 364 days, maybe with a possibility of extension. If they say extra budgetary funding, it might be that that funding could be very limited. So it really depends, but most of the vacancy notices will state that. And back to the question as to the salary in field positions. No, part of the attraction of the field positions is that you get a lot of extra entitlements for putting up with conditions like being in a non-family duty station, danger pay, R&R pay, and they're all stated on the UN sites as well, or on the International Civil Service Commission website as well.
All right, wonderful. We also have a quick question about the length of cover letters and CVs. So somebody is asking what the ideal length is. If somebody submits a 2-page CV, is that an automatic no from the recruiter?
Becky, would you like to say something, or?
My personal opinion is try to still keep it to 1 page, because I mean, often you have people that have 20 years experience that can still fit it into 1 page. So bless you, Maki. So if we're talking about graduate or lower level positions, I really question whether you have 2 pages worth of really relevant things to say. It would not exclude you, but it can be overwhelming for the hiring manager, I would say. And that applies to any positions, honestly. As for a 4-page CV, not a big deal, but again, look at the relevance. Are you being succinct enough with your the recounting of your experience? I don't know, I have to think about mine. But I probably have about 3 or 4 pages myself, but that's after about 15 years of working experience. Even so, we've spoken about 10 here. I've been working since I was about 20 in the office environment. So yeah, think about it. That said, I mean, I've seen PHPs with 32 pages. And I remember commenting to my colleague, wow, how can someone have 32 pages?
But, in this,
Incredible.
I always say, like, ask yourself the same question, like, would you read a 2-page? I mean, if it's compelling and exciting to read, why not? It's like a book. There's some books which are amazing and you cannot stop reading. And some books at the summary, it's really like, oh, why? So that's put yourself always in the perspective, the exercise we did before. Like, I'm writing something and will I read it? Would someone read it? Because if it's relevant and compelling, why not? Of course, it's not that you're put out because of the length. Of course not. But if it's irrelevant, most likely.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think that's all the time we have. We have other.
Sorry, there was one more question I saw on there, which was the first one that was posted.
Oh, all right. Sorry, my bad. So somebody was asking, what is your advice for trying to fit your existing qualification into the YPP business role? So, for instance, if a legal role is not advertised.
Okay. So here's the clue, really. Often the area of study is listed, and then it might be followed by or related area. And this is the tricky part. If it doesn't say related and you don't, so for example, if it says accounting and finance, HR, I don't know, administration, and you want to apply with your legal degree, probably not going to you won't be eligible. But if it says or related area, and you can see that the job includes elements of the legal area, then go for it. If we're talking about the example that Maki used in the presentation, because you asked specifically about a YPP position, if you look at education under the magnet or HR position, it lists business and admin, environment, humanities, law. So actually, we have law in most areas, whether it's HR, whether it is the political, like human rights area, if it's our internal investigations area, there's many things, the ethics office. So there, especially under magnet, I would say law is considered, Polnet as well, just Infonet probably not. So I don't know what advice to add, because I think law is relevant in most cases and it is usually listed.
Yeah. Michael, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I'm totally thinking that, but I will always, that's what I always suggest, think of transferable skills and how you relate. You know best. And when you write an application, make sure that comes across. That's the most important. And do your research. 2 questions that we answered today were available online, for instance. So this is indicator that we could, before applying, we need to do the research. And that helps a lot. It really helps a lot to understand where is the position, what it means. I don't know, for instance, the PHP, the acronym. I've learned it myself years ago because I was doing so many applications that at some point I was like, oh, I know what is the PHP or the P11 back in time. So I think to answer that question is the requirements are always clear what they are. However, if you have some doubt, do some research. You can also reach out, actually. Sometimes they have contact points they can reach out to further clarity, for even more clarity. But most of the times, ask yourself, what can I be transferring into the position that it's not really black and white, you know? I hope I answered, and I did not read the questions because I would be otherwise stuck and reading, so please excuse me on that.
No, but that's wonderful. Thank you both so much for all the very comprehensive answers. So yeah, we have officially run over time, but thank you so much for all the material, and the insights, for a fantastic presentation. And just to remind everybody that's still around, on the chat you can find the link to enter the raffle. So we'll let you know if you got the ebook or not later tomorrow. And also make sure to check out OpenIGO. So I've also linked their website there. You can look at their products. You can look at the online magazine where some of UNSOC's articles are featured. So yeah, thanks so much again for joining us today. And I really hope that this session was useful and that hopefully you'll apply to the YPP at some point in your life. So.
And everybody, just as on a side note, the recording of this presentation will also be available on our YouTube channel. So that's OpenIGO Network. You can access it also through our Instagram account, which is at UN Internships.